Week 1 is a discussion about the theories and models of instructional design. Before we begin, however, I want to clarify that I will not be saying very much about the ADDIE model mentioned in Chapter 1 of our textbook. I won't be saying much because the guideline does not rely on any theory of cognition or learning, nor does it really supply instructional strategies to the attributes of the technology. In this clip, I'll briefly introduce 3 models to you, or 3 kinds of models, as it were. Each one is an important part of the course. An omnibus model called DECL, which there's another clip that's more detailed. A macro model called elaboration theory. And that's for the more of the psychological of you who are out there who may be interested in psychological applications and how they might help educational interests. And a micro model called the SSF model of instructional design. Let's take one at a time. The omnibus model called DECL is a sociological model of instructional design. DECL stands for Delivery, Environment, Content, and Learner Factors that comprise achievement. So we'll follow up on this model. Details of the model can be found in my 2005 paper, Making Your Own Educational Materials. The macro model that we'll refer to in this course is called elaboration theory. And it's so named because learning is described as a biological schema-building process through strategy activation within a neural network structure of the learner's brain. So it's also useful to remember, and if I just take a minute here, is that this is consistent with the cognitive load theory and is consistent with other biological models, and it is a biological model, it's not a conceptual model of learning. All right? The last one then is a micro model that we'll use in this course is called the Seals and Glasgow model of instructional design. That's the textbook, those are the authors of the textbook. We'll be following this as a procedural design model that arranges learning objectives hierarchically based on Robert Gagnier's conditions of learning and match external conditions of learning with internal mental states of the learner. Gagnier identified major categories of learning: verbal information, intellectual skills, cognitive strategies, motor skills, and attitudes. These are important to us as they should comprise the types of objectives you'll be including in your self-instructional product for this course. So the Seals and Glasgow model is a procedural model of instructional design, and it will deal with the different categories or domains of learning Gagnier specified. Other procedural models like Gagnier, Dick and Carey's model, Dick and Carey, Smith and Reagan have a model that is similar to that, and the very famous David Merrill, his component display theory is based on this hierarchical model of instructional design, first put out by Robert Gagnier. Just talk about the textbook, that their model, Seals and Glasgow, talk about, and we're going to talk about a little bit of terminology they use, enabling objectives, or EOs, okay, are that they'll be sequenced on a flow chart. And so you'll be making a flow chart for me, if you would, that sequences these EOs, or enabling objectives. And that these are, they start from the bottom with the most simplest and will go up your flow chart. And they are what we call cumulative and subsumptive, which means you have to do the early ones before you do the later ones. Okay? When written out, they're presented in an ABCD format, or audience, behavior, condition, and degree. Learning is presumed to occur as the objectives on the hierarchy are grouped by instructional strategy. So what you do is, once you've got all your laid out on a flow chart, and you take a pencil and you say, okay, I'm not going to do all these show him all these objectives. It just take me too long, and frankly, I just want to get through this course, so I've got to take this pencil and make a circle around some of the objectives. That's what I'm going to develop as my instructional strategy. And then check with me to see if that constitutes an exemplary, or could constitute an exemplary project for you. Now, if learning does not occur then with this arrangement of objectives, we suspect one of two things. Something called a disconfirmatory response pattern in the objectives. That means that the ones that we thought were quite a bit more advanced were actually simpler objectives than the ones that are down at the bottom. Okay? Disconfirmatory response pattern. The other option that might happen is something what Fred Paz has talked about in the Netherlands, which is something called an expertise reversal effect. The expertise reversal effect is where learners will advance to such a degree that they no longer can, they find that the instruction is not doing anything for them. They've already reached mastery. Okay? All right, in this clip then, we discussed, or I discussed, 3 things about instructional design that some are touched on in other clips. First, I discussed 4 kinds of instructional design models, introduced guidelines, and I also talked about the SSF model. Also talked about Seals and Glasgow model and different procedural models that we will be talking about as well, all in aid of giving you the tools to do an excellent instructional design.